Hey everybody, welcome to episode 20 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. On this episode, we're going to talk about TSI timing chain tensioners, Mark V hard starts, and scary suspension noises.
Paul via shopdap.com wants to know how common is a TSI tensioner failure. I have a 2011 GTI and have been affected by some of the other common Mark VI items, such as a high pressure fuel pump, low pressure fuel pump, and water pump. My car has 58,000 miles on it, so I'm very close to being out of powertrain warranty. Should I look into replacing the tensioner at this point? What is the typical cost of having a shop do the replacement?
Okay, Paul. So should you replace your timing chain tensioner as a preventative? I would say absolutely 100% yes. And here's why. So replacing it is going to be fairly costly. Our kit is around $250 with a cover, the updated timing chain tensioner, and some sealant and the tool, the special tool for installing it. Labor for that, I'm not sure about it, but I'd say it's roughly around 4 or 5 hours. Now you're looking at probably, roughly around $700 or $800, which is pretty expensive. But here's the alternative. The alternative is to drive the vehicle and hope it doesn't break. If it does break, you're looking at somewhere in the $4,000 range, which is obviously a pretty big leap from $800 to $4,000. And so you can almost say you can't afford not to replace it, because the alternative is a $4,000 bill that you're going to be stuck with, assuming there's no other major damage to the engine. Now that's another thing that recently I've had people reach out to me saying that the dealer contacted them after having this problem where the timing chain tensioner busted, and they're being told that they have to replace the complete engine, roughly to the tune of about $8,000. And I've had 2 or 3 people contact me and tell me that and ask me if does that seem legitimate, can you get me an engine, all that stuff. Most people in those situations seem to go towards the route of getting a used engine just because it is more cost effective to get your vehicle back on the road. Now, also a side note on that, if you're planning to get rid of the vehicle, not replacing your timing chain tensioner is fine as long as you're planning on doing it, somewhere in the near future. But the engine situation, the reason why I reached out to a dealer friend of mine in New Jersey who told me that they actually have recommended engines to customers in the past, but for specific reasons. So the reason why he said was most common that they would recommend an engine would be because of lack of maintenance. So the timing chain tensioner, it has is oil pressure driven in some parts of it, and so if you have either low quality oil or extend the life too long on your oil changes, it could create a situation where the poor quality creates a clog, and that's why the tensioner fails prematurely. So poorly maintaining your vehicle could even expedite the process of a timing chain tensioner failing. So in that situation, what he said is that what they're finding is on those cars that have been neglected, that they pull down some of the rod bearing and main bearing caps and find that they're scored. And so what that scoring is an indication of is damage to the bearings, and that the engine would actually need to be rebuilt. In that particular instance, most often with VW, if you're talking about tearing down an engine, rebuilding it, and the cost of labor, parts, and all that stuff combined, it generally tends to be more cost effective to replace the engine. That way, number one, you're getting a fresh engine. Number two, obviously there's no question marks as far as what other problems there could be with problems were created by the lack of maintenance on that particular engine. So in that instance, it makes sense completely that you would replace an engine. Otherwise, the only other instance I could see replacing an engine because of bent valves would be if it was a high RPM when the timing chain popped, and let's say 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 RPM, which caused the valve to actually damage the internals of the engine. So it blew through the piston, or it broke off completely and jammed through the block, something like that. It happens, but it's not generally common. Most times when those pop, as far as I'm concerned, and I've been aware of with some of the general consensus of people, it just bends valves. You replace the cylinder head, and then it's all done and fixed. We put together a kit for that. It's roughly around $1,800, and it includes the cylinder head with the valves and gaskets and timing chains and all that stuff. So in that case, you're replacing cylinder head, valves, timing chain, all that stuff, and you're looking at probably somewhere in the range of about, let's say, even if it's not from us and you're paying somewhere in the $2,500 range for the parts, and you're probably $1,000, $1,500 for labor, you're going to be somewhere in the $4,000 range for the total repair, and that's probably more realistic for most people. So just something to be aware of, and obviously keep an eye on. Definitely want to get that tensioner replaced.
The user on Vortex is having trouble starting his 2008 FSI. After I leave the car parked overnight, the first starting attempt takes several turns of the keys to get the engine going. Once it's started during the day, the car starts easily on the first try. I've replaced plugs, coils, and done carbon cleaning, everything, and the problem persists. The car has 143,000 miles on it, and it's been done since about 50,000 miles. I've read it could be the low pressure fuel pump. The high pressure fuel pump has been replaced. Any thoughts? I should add no codes or CE.
So a hard start issue or a slow start issue on that car, most likely it sounds like you're on the right track, fuel pump or something related to that system. So here's a few things I wanted to touch on with this. It sounds like the reason why it's not starting easily is because the fuel pump is not priming or it's not working initially. So you probably have an issue with either the low pressure fuel pump is just not functioning properly, and maybe it takes some time to actually get going. It also could be related to the low pressure fuel pump module. We have a bunch of information about that. Generally they tend to overheat and kind of melt the module. We'll put a link. We have an article about that low pressure fuel pump module and a video embedded in that our buddy Charles, the home mechanic, did on that. The other thing that could trick a lot of people in this instance would be the door latch. So this could be potentially related to the lack of door priming. So what happens in most VW and Audi models is when you either unlock your doors or you open your door, the fuel pump will initially turn on and prime the engine. That way it sends fuel up to the engine so the car does not take a while to start. So what happens is a lot of times these door latches will fail, causing the door priming to not function at all. So you go to open your door, the vehicle doesn't recognize that you opened the door, so then it doesn't prime the fuel system, and so when you go to turn it on, it's sucking in air for a little bit until it actually kicks in and then it starts, which could be related to your issue because the fuel system has check valves in it, which prevents pressure from bleeding off backwards. So once you get it started through the day, that could be holding your pressure through the day, but then obviously it leaks down overnight and then your problem starts over again. So any of those three are very plausible explanations. The door latch is usually pretty easy to check. If your door latch doesn't register that it's open or closed, or you have sporadic alarm issues, it's easy to get in the car, sit in there, open the door, and see if the dome lights come on or the dash recognizes that the door has been opened, assuming that your car has that, which it should. If it recognizes that the door is open, then you know that it's functioning properly. But if it sporadically maybe doesn't, or sometimes the alarm will go off by itself, that is generally a good sign you have a door latch. If not, it could be related to the fuel pump or the module. So check them out. Let us know.
Very nice channel and very useful. I have a 2009 Mark V GLI. Ever since I made a full front suspension refresh, I've been getting an awful noise from the front suspension when suddenly braking. It sounds like a hammer on metal, very loud. It only comes from when braking suddenly. If I brake gradually, it does fine. The refresh work had replaced shocks, shock mounts, front and back arm bushings, subframe bolts, and I've repeatedly torqued all the bolts and checked under the car for loose parts with no luck. Hope you can help me. Thanks in advance.
Okay, so the noise that you're describing sounds actually really bad. It's hard to really say how bad it is, but if it sounds like metal on metal noise, that's probably not good. Most likely, it's probably related to the install based on what my perspective is on the situation. And my first thought is the strut bushings have an orientation that's correct, that they have like a notch in them, so they have to be in the correct orientation or they won't seat in there properly. So that might be your issue. If it's not related to that, there's something else with the install that probably went wrong, or you could have a faulty part. But that seems less likely based on the severity of the noise. So start with the strut bushings, and then from there maybe You know, it could be subframe related or something is loose along the way, but it's really hard to say. It almost sounds like the fact that it's during braking that the subframe is shifting. So maybe check to make sure that maybe the right bolts, I don't know where you purchased it from, but the right bolts were installed in the right places. And maybe even check the front control arms have a rear bracket that mounts them on. I don't know, maybe those are shifting or those bushings are bad. It's really hard to say, but I would say go over your install, maybe even completely redo the install or bring it to somebody to have them check out, because it sounds like it could be a safety problem, so I wouldn't really continue to drive the car based on the noise you're describing to me. Thank you for watching episode 20 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. If you want your questions answered, shoot us an email, info@shopdap.com.
Y'all ready for this?